Hello and welcome to another Bristlecone broadcast. I'm Michael Lean. I have with me again Ramesh Doriraj, who you've seen before and is joining us again to go over 3 strategies for supplier diversity. So I'm going to turn it over to Ramesh. What's the first one?
What I have seen that works really effectively for companies to actually drive some amount of supplier diverse spend without even having to make large-scale organizational changes, right? That's what I'm going to touch on today. So the three main ones that I have seen are pre-qualifying diverse suppliers. Okay, this is something like a proactive step that companies can take. Setting up preferred vendor programs, where they give the opportunity for companies to buy from diverse suppliers. And lastly, you can't kind of downplay just proactive outreach efforts that any company makes, joining industry organizations, getting to know their diverse suppliers, sponsoring community events, going into schools and other kind of social centers to kind of advertise about themselves. I think those outreach efforts, obviously, it has a longer runway, but then I think they also bear a lot of fruit. So those are the 3 core strategies.
Take us to pre-qualification. What does that mean?
So essentially what pre-qualification means is this. Think about it. If you were a manufacturing company and you manufactured certain items that were designed to an engineering spec, you would need to pre-qualify suppliers to make sure that they have what it takes to manufacture that item for you, right? Per your quality standards and specifications. Now, that's kind of an engineering explanation of what pre-qualification is. But, let's take a simple example, janitorial services, right? If you can identify suppliers who can meet your kind of minimum insurance requirements or, kind of headcount requirement, like, hey, you need to have at least 30 janitors and staff to be able to come and, work on some of our programs. Be able to identify and pre-qualify some of these vendors. You may not be doing business with them right now, but at least you know who they are. And Michael Lean and Enterprises becomes a pre-qualified supplier so that you can actually easily contract them in the future when an opportunity arises. So that's what's called pre-qualification, knowing more about these vendors, having their documents on file, and potentially even signing something like a letter of intent saying, hey, when an opportunity arises, I intend to use you as a potential vendor for XYZ category.
And I imagine procurement typically leads this, but is it a separate effort, or is it just woven into their DNA? How do they make sure that this is happening proactively? Because it sounds like, they're busy. They're already trying to pre-qualify what the business units are trying to bring on. How do they make room for it? I mean, how does this look in an organization typically?
So the pre-qualification process, I've seen companies where procurement completely drives it. And what they really mean by that is finding these diverse vendors and also ensuring that all their documents are in place and have been kind of checked to see, okay, it meets the minimum standards. I think the most important minimum standard that's usually checked is this vendor able to carry a certain level of liability insurance that we require if we were to do business with him or her? Many really small companies, if you're like a 2 to 3 man shop and then you just get contractors to kind of work for you, they may not have the capability to have like $1 to $5 million worth of insurance that they can carry for themselves. So that itself is an easy way to kind of, eliminate some of the vendors. So oftentimes procurement works with risk management within a company to make sure, okay, tell me, what are your minimum do we have any minimum standards, or are we willing to, maybe give a few exceptions to that in order to work with diverse vendors? Take that list of qualifications and then work with them. Sometimes risk management in companies, a separate group called risk management, which usually reports into the finance group, will do some of the pre-qualification work, right? And then there are other companies where, they don't have a risk management team. They just have a third party who specifically focuses on, doing some risk management for potential vendors and then provides you a report, an unbiased report, which then you can kind of, leverage to pre-qualify your vendors.
Got it. So what's the second strategy? Can we go into that?
The second strategy, that I have seen effectively work is setting up preferred vendor programs. Now, the preferred vendor programs kind of goes hand in hand with two different things. One is making sure that you have a chief diversity officer within the company who can, sponsor these things, who can be the executive champion for these preferred vendor programs. And then second, as you identify some of these, as you pre-qualify some of these vendors, go an extra step further. I was talking about a letter of intent where you may say, hey, if I have a need, I'll reach out to you. But really, a preferred vendor agreement, what it says is, okay, let's set up some pricing parameters around when I do give you business, how's that going to work? And if we can set up these pricing parameters right now, I'm going to socialize that around my company so that you may immediately start getting some business. So I'm not going to wait till next year when a spot opens up for you and call you, but rather let's even put up a pricing agreement in place and let me actually go tell people about it. Okay. Maybe during our weekly call, Michael, with your team, you may say, okay, hey, by the way, here's the preferred vendor contract I put together with this vendor. Communicate that out to all your, stakeholders and all your other office locations so that they can kind of start using them. Okay, so that's what's preferred vendor programs. Usually, preferred vendor programs are tied in with, hey, if you give me a certain amount of annual spend, I will give you X amount of a discount. Okay, so that kind of entices us to further use these preferred vendors, saying, oh wow, okay, A, they pre-qualified. Two, if I spend so much with them, I get a discount. Therefore, I am going to use them. Okay, so it's going the next step further after pre-qualifying a vendor.
And it seems like all of these strategies flow into the third, which is where you're going to find them in the first place. So can you talk a little bit about the third strategy?
I think the third strategy really is, it's a combination of, kind of like a social awareness as a company. First of all, sponsoring, socially progressive events, right? Like, whether it's, going to disadvantaged communities and doing, cookie runs or, food drives. And you'll be surprised at like how many different companies you would meet at these events, because just like you, there's a lot of diverse vendors who are also sponsoring such events at underprivileged communities, schools, and, other centers. So that's a great way to do it. And it could be as simple as like a bake sale on a Sunday, or sponsoring to like maybe take up 10 houses in an underprivileged community and upgrading it and painting it, right? So those are some events you can do. And then second, becoming members of diverse supplier organizations and then going to their annual conferences, okay? And now diversity could mean several things. I mean, I think you definitely have the LGBTQ plus, you also have the woman-owned, right? And then you have the veteran-owned. So take a look at all your diverse kind of like categorizations and identify societies and other kind of conferences that you can sign up for and attend on an annual basis, give talks, set up booths, have vendors approach you, talk to you, get their information, and then pre-qualify them and so on and so forth, right? And I think it's important to know that many companies kind of do this, but having a chief diversity officer to kind of drive some of this and constantly be focused on these outreach efforts is a key way to get there. Now, you may already be having some diverse spend that you don't know about. So this is kind of like a loose strategy where you talk to your current vendors who are doing business with you and say, hey, if you use any diverse subcontractors, as you provide work for me, as you do work for me, or as you provide, products to me, I'd like you to report on who those diverse vendors are and what portion of your spend is attributed to that. So because then you can say, all right, I spent $100 with this guy, 10% of that came from diverse vendors. Therefore, I have $10 worth of diversity spend. Okay. But the critical importance to really actually kind of, empower diverse vendors is not just to kind of get a diverse partner just so that you can pass on the spend and say, hey, I got it. But try to identify diverse vendors who are offering a particular service or a particular kind of skill set that the larger companies don't offer. Okay, so you're effectively taking on a partner who brings a unique skill set to the table, who happens to be a diverse vendor, and therefore you're able to attribute that spend for yourself.
So Ramesh, you talked about the three strategies. Everybody here who is watching this broadcast probably already understands the importance of diversity, but it's worth stating again. Why do this? Why have three strategies? Why bring in diverse vendors into your business? What does it do?
See, I think the main thing about driving diversity spend is, first of all, it's being able to give and the opportunities to companies of all sizes, and it has good social implications, right? Because it shows that we're an inclusive company. So that's kind of harder to quantify, right? But it's the right thing to do, right, from a social standpoint. The other reason why diversity spend is important is oftentimes companies are not aware that there are smaller companies, often diverse companies, that are much more capable of offering the same value that you get from an otherwise larger company at a much lower cost point. Okay, so there are, financial implications as well. I wanted to quote an example. I worked at a large real estate management company a few years ago, and we were able to award the air conditioning upgrade for a big building in Salt Lake City to a local diverse vendor. Initially, we were a little bit skeptical because we had preferred vendor contracts with the large, HVAC providers like Trane and, Johnson Controls. But we decided to go with this local guy who didn't manufacture his own HVAC systems. He bought it from the big guys, but he did all this installation and servicing, right? The fact of the matter is the contracting process was much more easier with him. Okay. He was able to provide us the insurance requirements that we needed, and he was way cheaper. I mean, he did not have a large kind of overhead to manage, and he had a bunch of local people within Salt Lake City, all belonging to the local union. So that was also very important to our company. And he was able to get the work started very soon. Okay. There was almost like no lead time to say, okay, hey, I need to do this. I need to check with my boss to see if I can get this done. He was the CEO of the company. He was also the head HVAC guy in the company. So it was much easier to get to get the project started. And he was much more, competitive on the price point. And I know for this day, and this was about 4 years ago, I know that company is still doing like the after installation servicing right now. I believe they were able to get a 5-year contract. So you'll be surprised that there's a lot of qualified companies out there which can provide you a much better price point and cut out a lot of the red tape that you have in dealing with a larger company.
Wonderful. So not only is it good business, it's just the right thing to do.
It is the right
win-win all around.
Yep.
Ramesh, thank you for joining me for this broadcast. To everyone tuning in, we are very good in this. If you're having trouble finding diverse vendors, if you want to know how to implement this strategy so it's woven into your DNA, Ramesh is an expert, but we have a lot of other people internally that can help. So just reach out to us if you have any questions. We're more than happy to give an upfront conversation, no strings attached. And we're committed to this because, as we said, it's not only good business, it's just the right thing to do. And we try to pay those learnings forward to you as well. No strings attached.